right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, obviously, we're going to be talking about the Raiders here on Raiders Daily as they have officially wrapped up the preseason. And before you know it, Raiders regular season football will be here. And we're going to break it all down in tonight's video. I got to say, I am still hopefully optimistic, or maybe cautiously optimistic, for this Las Vegas Raiders team. I really don't think they're going to be worse than they were last season, both statistically and with the eye test. I think it's hard to, even though the offense ranked wise last season was not bad, I think it's going to be hard to be as inconsistent as that offensive group was this past season. And great news coming out of the Raiders camp this past week is that Josh Jacobs signed a contract. So Josh Jacobs will be RB1 for this team. When we take a look at it on paper, this Raiders offense, in my opinion, can compete with anybody. What it's going to come down to is what Jimmy G does best, and that's limiting turnovers and getting touchdowns over field goals. It's just as simple as that. You want to convert touchdowns. That was a huge flaw, in my opinion, for the Raiders this past season. Was, it feels like the offense would be, starting really good. It actually didn't even matter at what point in the game it was. It felt like they'd move the ball down the field so effortlessly. It felt like, especially with Josh Jacobs, Davante Adams. Then they'd get to the red zone and they'd struggle to convert touchdowns as opposed to just getting points up on the board. If the Raiders want to compete, if they want to compete this upcoming season in the loaded AFC and the loaded AFC West, well, they're going to have to put up touchdowns. And I know that sounds redundant and obvious, but you got to like the targets on this Raiders offense. Outside of Jimmy G, your starting quarterback, outside of Josh Jacobs, your starting running back, you have a loaded wide receiver room. And we saw a lot of flashes from guys like Trey Tucker, DeAndre Carter, Phillip Dorsett. We saw speed in the preseason, which is something that this team desperately lacked this past year. But before we get any further into tonight's video, if you guys enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button. I post daily Raiders content on this channel. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the start of the regular season. So if we get this video to 500 likes, that would mean the absolute world to me. So you have your starting three, your big three at the wide receiver position, and Davante Adams, Jakobi Meyers, and Hunter Renfrow. You have right there like three borderline 1,000-yard receivers. Davante Adams, obviously wide receiver one. Will Jakobi Meyers and Hunter Renfrow both clear over 1,000 yards this upcoming season? Most likely not, but they're going to be between 800 to 1,000 receiving yards. Your big three at wide receivers, one of the best in the entire National Football League. I still don't really get it how some people debate that. Davante Adams is Davante freaking Adams. Hunter Renfrow, third and Renfrow, and Jakobi Meyers is consistent and he is reliable. But then, as we mentioned, you have this speed in your back pocket with Phillip Dorsett, DeAndre Carter, and Trey Tucker, which also is going to pay dividends in punt returns, kick returns, and special teams in general. Watch for the Raiders this upcoming season to be a very good special teams unit because of all that speed. Trey Tucker, both punt returns and kick returns in preseason in the first two games, he did more than enough. So a lot of positives there. One quick note, it does suck. I highly doubt that Christian Wilkerson ends up making the roster. However, you never know, but I do think he will get signed to the practice squad as he should. Tight end room, you have Austin Hooper there, but Michael Mayer, the main tight end, the big boy second-round draft pick out of the University of Notre Dame. He's going to be a big target for Jimmy G, but you have two tight ends. You have this kind of nice two-headed monster at the tight end unit. Austin Hooper, Michael Mayer, I think they'll both be well over 500 receiving yards, each of them this upcoming season. And we're going to be looking at the combined both of them in the red zone. You could be looking at 10 touchdowns right there. So offensively, the Raiders will rank top 10. Defensively are where the question marks come in. I will say, I don't love the Raiders' depth. I think the Raiders' defense is going to surprise a lot of people. You have Max Crosby, you have Chandler Jones, you have Double D, you've got Marcus Peters coming on over. There's an intriguing bunch of rookies. Jacorian Bennett made a big name for himself in preseason and training camp. We just saw Tyree Wilson make his Raiders debut, which, by the way, the dude's a bulldozer. Yeah, he looked, I wouldn't say slow because he's more of a slow bull rush pass rusher. That didn't make sense, but you get what I'm saying. He's not known for like this crazy speed, this crazy first step to get around the offensive line. He's slow and dominant and a physical beast. So will Tyree Wilson enter the NFL this upcoming season and have 10 plus sacks? I'm going to say definitely not, especially considering he's playing behind Chandler Jones. But you're going to see plenty of Tyree Wilson showing why he was picked at number 7 in this upcoming season. I'm very curious what that edge is going to look like, because the Raiders last season, was the secondary good? Not really, but did the pass rush help the secondary? Not in the slightest. There was no pass rush on this Raiders team outside of Max Crosby, and that is something that they need to change immediately. So that defensive line, Bilal Nichols, Jerry Tillery, along with Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, you gotta hit the QB. The linebacker unit is my big flaw with this team. You've got Double D, Robert Spillane, and Luke Masterson, who's been with the Raiders for a couple of seasons. I just don't think there's much pop there. However, I will say this. One thing that's going to make the linebackers a lot better is Double D's a star. The dude's a star, and I think he's going to make a Pro Bowl this upcoming season. The guy had like 10 tackles a game in the 7 or 8 games that he played for the Raiders this past season. Double D entering year 3. I think we're going to see the breakout into a star this season. The secondary is very enticing. I don't think it's that bad of a secondary. I mean, maybe the depth is a little bit young. It's a little bit unproven. But right now, as it stands, you got Nate Hobbs, Marcus Epps, Trevon Moehrig, Marcus Peters. You've got Duke Shelley, David Long Jr., Jacorian Bennett, Chris Smith, the second new draft pick as your depth. The defense, in my opinion, is going to hover around middle of the pack. And the reason I think so is I think they will, same as last year, it's year number 2 under Patrick Graham. I think it's going to be a bend, don't break philosophy for this defense in the first half of the season. Very similar to last year, except hopefully they get started a little bit better. But that Raiders defense last season, they were getting stops, especially in the last month or so of the season. They were getting stops when they needed to get stops. Yeah, maybe teams were throwing over them, maybe they were running over them, but especially in the red zone, when we start getting to 30 yards and less, I think the Raiders defense did a really good job in the end of the season of holding up and not allowing as many touchdowns. So defensively, I'm optimistic. I'm carefully optimistic about it, but I think it will be, around slightly worse than middle of the pack, hover around 20th in the first half of the season. And then second half of the season, hopefully everything starts to click. These guys' chemistry, their confidence skyrockets, and you go into the second half of the season and you got to hopefully as close to a lockdown defense as you're going to get with this Raiders roster. One thing I do want to say is Raiders playoff hopes, I really don't think they're that crazy. I really don't think it's that crazy. Keep in mind, there's about 6 new teams in the last, 20, 30 years. There's usually like 4 to 6 new teams in the playoffs every single season. And I know the AFC is loaded, but I think there's a common misconception with the AFC West. For me, it's a lot more of a mystery. It's a lot more of a mystery than it is a powerhouse. I know the Chargers, they made the playoffs this past season, obviously getting completely embarrassed by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the second half of that postseason game. But, I have question marks with the Chargers. I have question marks with the Broncos. I don't really have question marks with the Chiefs, but you never know what could happen. Mahomes could get banged up. Kelsey could get banged up. And just like that, the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe aren't as dominant whenever the Raiders run into them this upcoming season. But my point stands, the Chiefs are and will remain the kings of the AFC West, in my opinion, this upcoming season. But I really don't think number 2 in the AFC West, I don't see why it isn't up for grabs. And I do want to say, as we conclude this video, Josh McDaniels, I think, is the guy. This is a coach who players, owners, coaches, they love him and they respect him. There's a reason Bill Belichick let Josh McDaniels command the Patriots offense for nearly a decade. There's a reason Tom Brady absolutely loves Josh McDaniels. Like, the dude is a smart guy. He's a very smart guy. And I don't think that his tenure with the Denver Broncos should be held against him. There are so many. I mean, he was a young guy, just a little ahead of himself, just a little ahead of himself in his tenure at Denver. And I think he's really grown, matured, and I think he's learned so much from that absolute failure in his brief tenure as the Broncos head coach a couple of years ago. I think he's learned a lot from it. And so I think, I know Josh McDaniels isn't, Raiders fans' biggest fan favorite right now, but I think this is the season Josh McDaniels changes that tide and it becomes, I think I see what he's doing and I like it. And I think Jimmy G and I think all of this speed, the Raiders offense, it's going to be booming. I really think it's going to be zipping. If Jimmy G can stay upright, watch out for the Raiders, man. I wouldn't be surprised if they won over 9 games. In fact, if I had to take a guess right now, my guess would be the Raiders this upcoming season go 9-8. So let me know what you guys are thinking. That's it for tonight. As always, hit that like button, hit that sub button. This was just kind of a little bit of a preview heading into the regular season. We have roster cuts coming up in less than, or and yeah, around 24 hours from the time of this recording. So stay tuned for daily Raiders content. As always, hit that like button, hit that sub button. But guys, most importantly, let me know what you're thinking about this Raiders team heading into the regular season.